This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian. I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
Look, some of us are lazy, alright?
If by lazy you mean wrong.
Prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide whether the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because guess what? This film is lit. A brave little girl, a sarcastic cat, and a fantasy world that isn't quite what it seems. It's Katie's favorite book, it's Coraline, and this film is lit.
Yay, my favorite book.
Yes, that's it. It's the 6th episode. Welcome back to This Film is Lit. And like we said in our first of our 2 Halloween episodes, we will be doing Coraline, and yes, this is Katie's favorite book. Came out in 2002. The film came out in 2009. We're going to talk about it. Now, this is the first time for us because this is the first time where I have read the book before seeing the movie. And now, I had thought before, previously, I was like, I think I've seen this movie. As we were watching it again, I don't think I've ever seen this movie. So I think I actually legitimately read the book before because I read the book for the first time, last year sometime.
Yeah.
And then I just reread it, over the last few days for this. And as I was, for some reason in my head, I thought I had seen Coraline, but after watching it, I'm actually pretty sure I had not. I was like, none of this, looks familiar.
You might have been thinking of another Leica.
I was either thinking of another Leica or just I don't know what I was thinking of. But I don't think I've seen it. If I have, I completely forgot everything about the movie. So, this is our first episode where we're going to have both read the book, so it's going to be a little bit different. We're not going to have all of our segments. It's just going to be more, we're going to do better in the book, we're going to do better in the movie, and then we're going to pick, each of us will get to pick whether we think the book or the movie is better.
We're going to potentially have it out.
Yeah, we may, we'll see. But let's first get into a little bit about the movie, about the book, before we get into the breakdown and the differences. Coraline, the book, written 2002 by...
The one, the only, Neil Gaiman.
Yes, one of your favorite authors, if not your favorite author. One of,
yes.
I would say, probably top 5 or something like
Probably top 5, yeah.
Some of the other stuff he's done, he's written a lot of comics, or a fair amount of comics.
He did the Sandman comics.
Yeah.
He wrote American Gods, which is now a TV show.
Yeah. He wrote a few episodes of Doctor Who, if you're a Doctor Who fan. The one in specific, this is for people who might know, the episode I know for sure that he wrote, there's a couple, but the one for sure he wrote was where they go to the junk world and the TARDIS gets put into a woman. Yeah,
TARDIS turns into a lady.
Yeah, it turns into a lady, the lady TARDIS episode.
The Doctor's Wife or
something. I think it's called The Doctor's Wife. He wrote that episode and a few others, but
Neverwhere, Anansi Boys, Stardust.
Yeah, Stardust, which is one of your favorite movies.
Yes.
We could do Stardust one day.
Yeah. One of these days.
Yeah. So, Stardust, that's a fun movie. Neil Gaiman's prolific writer, prolific sci-fi young adult fantasy, I don't know, young adult's fair, but a lot of it's young adult stuff. He does other stuff,
He writes stuff, all across the board.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things that I really admire about him, is that, he does write primarily fantasy, but he's not, super boxed in by, a particular type of writing.
No, well, because, like I said, we were talking about American Gods, which we have on our shelf, and one day we'll read, but it's very long. And that's much more, that's not young adult as far as I know. That's very much for an older audience, adult audience. And then, he's done lots of stuff like Coraline, which is 162 pages and is very clearly a children's book to an extent, or a young adult children's book. So he's prolific, but he's also very wide ranging in what he writes. And it's very impressive. So the film came out in 2009, produced by Leica Studios. It was their first feature length film. You may know other things from Leica. Paranorman, The Box Trolls, and most recently Kubo and the Two Strings, which all of those are great. I've never seen Paranorman.
I think I've seen it.
We watched The Box Trolls not too long ago on Netflix. That was fun. It wasn't amazing, but it was good. And then Kubo's incredible. Kubo's really, really good. And me and Kyle from Good, Better, Bad, Bad did a review of it on our YouTube channel. So if you want to check out our thoughts on that, you can go check out Good, Better, Bad, Bad, Kubo and the Two Strings. It holds the record for the longest stop motion film in history right now.
Oh, Coraline does?
Yeah, because it's an hour and 40.
Oh, yeah, it was pretty long.
It's not crazy long, but it's an hour and 40, and that's every minute is so much more work. So stop motion tends to be on the shorter side generally because it's such an intensive amount of work to produce, even a second of screen time in stop motion. Was nominated for Best Animated Feature for a Golden Globe and an Oscar. It didn't win either. I didn't check what did win, but it's not really important. Supposedly, Neil Gaiman discussed the idea for this movie with Henry Selick, who is the director who also did Nightmare Before Christmas and James and the Giant Peach. He directed both of those, so he's pretty good. He's pretty known for stop motion. Apparently discussed the concept for the movie with him and was very involved in the production of the film. And some of the changes that were made, he okayed, which we'll discuss later, and was on board with. But we'll get there. So yeah, that's pretty much all the background info I got. So, just to get right into the film, Coraline is the story of a young girl who moves to a new house, goes exploring basically, and it's about her adventures and what happens. And so she basically finds a doorway in this new house that leads to another dimension, or another world, a fantasy world, the other world, where she encounters her other mother, her other father, who try to get her to stay there with them, and it's sort of an enticing world because back in the real world, her parents are sort of real busy and don't pay a lot of attention to her and that sort of thing. So this is kind of a much more enticing place for her, an escapist place for her, and which is a little bit different in the book and the movie, which we'll discuss. It basically devolves into the other mother wants her to stay there because basically to feed on her soul and that sort of thing, and then ends up kidnapping her parents, and then Coraline has to save her parents. It's pretty much the basic similar story. The story is pretty much identical in terms of the overarching story. The way it's told is very different, sort of different, but the actual story itself, there's no major story changes in terms of where the story goes. I wouldn't argue.
I mean, the main beats are all there.
Yeah, there are things that are added, there are things that are taken away, there are things that are done differently, but there's no giant, huge flip, which I thought there actually was the way they were doing it initially. I thought they were going to change one major thing, but let's talk about some major changes that they did make that are different, but not necessarily plot. The big one, and this is the thing I wrote down, there's a new character that's not in the book. And now, I remember you telling me this, because I remember you saying that you weren't a huge fan of the movie, or that you liked the movie, but it wasn't. And one of your things you said is they added a character that you did not like or did not think needed to be in the movie. And it now immediately stuck out to me as we were watching the film. I'm like, oh, so this character's name is Hybe. Wybe, not Hybe. Wybe, which stands for Why Born, because his mother, I guess...
Which is never expanded on, so I don't know what was the purpose of that?
No. Yeah, and then but we never meet his mom. We only meet his grandma.
Well, we meet his grandma at the very end.
Yeah. But yeah, the implication being that it's a quick character beat about him, that he's a bit of an outcast and unwanted. Yeah. I mean, and it's they literally do that by naming him Why Born, which is a little
on the nose,
weird, but okay, nobody else in the movie has a name like that. Or in the story, it's they have weird names, but none of them are these weird, it was a little interesting. So we introduced to him very early in the film. He shows up on his bike, and I was like, what is going on? I was very confused because I didn't know what it was, and he looks like a monster when he shows up. Yeah. And I was like, what the fuck is this? This wasn't in the book. So why do you not like Wybe?
Okay. So it's not that I have a problem with the character itself. I don't think that the addition of that character was necessary to the story, at all.
Yeah.
In the book, it's just Coraline.
Yes.
She's on her own. I mean, the cat's there.
The cat is there.
But the cat is a cat.
Yeah.
And he's a little helpful, but he's not like her sidekick or anything.
Not at all.
And I just didn't feel like he was a necessary addition. And so she does everything on her own in the book, and she wins in the end because she's brave and because she's clever.
Yeah.
And not because another character comes swooping in at the last minute to save her at the end.
That was my biggest problem with his addition. Was because overall he didn't bother me, and I understood a couple of reasons. I understood why they added him early in the film, because there's a lot of just her walking around doing things, and with the kind of what the feel they were going for, I think the idea was that they wanted somebody for her to bounce things off a little bit early on, and then he wasn't in it a lot for most of the middle of the film.
Yeah.
So like it didn't distract me as much as I thought it was going to when he first showed up. I'm like, God, is he going to be in like this whole thing? Because like that would be very strange to me, and would be very like jarring, and especially in comparison to the book. But what did bother me was at the end. Yes, so eventually she vanquishes the other mother. Or not vanquishes, but escapes the other world.
From the fantasy world, but the other mother's hand
comes through,
follows her through,
and we'll talk about that later. But the hand follows her through, and then she has to dispatch the hand. She ends up realizing that this happened, and she has to get rid of the hand. And the way she does it in the book, which I agree, this is better. This is a tough one. It's better in the book. She tricks the hand by setting up a sheet over the well that's in the movie, the well, but she sets up a picnic on the well and then sets the key on and uses like teacups to hold the tablecloth.
Makes it look like she's having like a doll tea party.
Yeah, and uses cups and stuff to hold it over the well thing, and then she sets the key on the tablecloth, and then the hand jumps to grab the key and tumbles down into the well. And so YB doesn't show up at all. And now I don't like that he showed up and had to help her, because then, it kind of takes the accomplishment away from her and transfers it to a whole other character. And now it's not like he completely saves the day and she doesn't do anything. I mean, they both are fighting it or whatever.
Sure, I guess.
But he does literally ride in on a horse and kind of save the day. They had to change that from how it was done in the movie, and here's why. Or the book, the ending, that part. Here's why they had to change it for the movie, in my opinion. So the big climax, the big visual climax of the film, and of the book to an extent, is her saving her parents and escaping. So she figures out her parents are in and this is a thing we'll talk about, but she figures out her parents are in the snow globe, gets the snow globe after she's able to collect all the souls of the kids that were trapped there. And then she figures out where her parents are, and she throws it. That all transpires pretty much the same or similar-ish, but I have a big problem with that scene. But and then she escapes through the door. And that's like the big climactic moment, and they make it even more visually climactic by having the floor. The other mother destroys the floor, and it turns into a spider web, which I thought was cool. I liked that part. I think because visually it needs to be more interesting than her. Not necessarily, but for the kind of movie this was, as a spectacle fantasy film, which is kind of what they're going to do. You need more than her just running through the door. I think probably, and I thought what they did was neat because it makes sense in the world. Since the other mother can do whatever she wants, that she makes it into a giant spider web. They push the spider thing way harder in the movie.
Yeah, it's a little on the nose, and because in the book it's more like a creepy feeling that you get, that spider analogy.
Yeah, I agree with that. I didn't like how heavily they went spider with her.
Yeah,
but again, with an animated kids movie, visually I felt like they probably felt like they couldn't just have it all look normal and a little weird. They want the bug visuals and all that stuff is neat looking and will be really visually interesting to kids, and they'll be more drawn in because it is a visual medium. So I understand that change. But so that's the big climax is her escaping, and that's like the big emotional climax. She gets her parents back, and then it's kind of the denouement and the horror movie. You didn't quite get her.
Yeah,
that's what the hand thing is. And now in the book, there's over the course of a week or a few days or whatever.
It's a couple days.
She figures out the hands there. She kind of tries to come up with a plan. She's going to the neighbors and figuring out that it's attacking the dog, the neighbor's downstairs dog, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's leaving gouges in her window.
Right. And so it's this whole thing. It's this whole drawn-out thing. And then she comes up with a plan, and the plan is, in the story, clever and works really well, but visually is a very boring thing to have happen, kind of. To where if she just went and had a picnic and then the hand jumped and fell down the well, you can do it interestingly, but I understand why they decided they needed another little
action
beat right there to sort of not have it be this weird afterthought, not that it was an afterthought, but to have it have some punch to it in the same way, because you just came off this big climax moment where she escapes. And I can see why they can also, they shortened that down a lot by her pretty much going to bed that night, immediately realizing, or the ghost,
immediately going out to
the ghost telling her,
of it.
And then she goes to throw the key down the well is what she's going to do. I think is the idea. She's just going to go, going to the well because she's going to go throw the key down the well. So I get why they changed it. I do agree that was the most jarring and annoying thing about YB was him showing up and saving the day. Or it changes that whole ending a little bit, and makes it less about her and more about them.
I just don't think he was necessary, and there's that, and then there's the issue of her being alone is kind of the whole point.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I totally agree with that. That adding that character does take away from the sort of, because you're telling this story. I imagine the reason the story resonated with you, and the reason the story resonate with a lot of people, is she is alone. Yeah, and that is a scary thing, but can also be a very empowering thing, which ends up being in the book, that she's able to do this by herself, basically. Right. With the help of some ghosts or whatever, but not ghosts, but the souls of the trapped kids help her shut the door. But so I get that, and I totally see that. Now, what I was saying earlier is that Neil Gaiman totally signed off on the addition of YB and was supposedly was on board with it. Now, I haven't looked and read any interviews to see what his actual if he's ever came out and I wasn't a huge fan, but he did sign off on it and thought and at least approved of it in the sense that he wasn't no, that's awful, you can't do that. So he thought it was at least okay with the story. Now, maybe who knows how much. They might have said, we're doing this because, one, we want a boy in the movie because we need to sell the boys. And so we can put a boy in the trailer. That's a whole other thing, but I don't know. I'd be interested to see the trailers and see how much he was featured in the trailers. Yeah. To try to sell this movie because, I wouldn't be surprised if they were trying to sell it to boys and they're like, we need a boy in the movie. It sucks and it's stupid, but it might have been the case.
Can you explain that to me? Why do boys not watch movies that don't have boys in them?
I don't know. I did. I'm not saying that. I think we're getting away from it. We're getting better now. But I think, now Leica doesn't tend to do stuff like that. They kind of just do whatever the fuck they want, it seems like. Yeah. But maybe with their first big feature film where they didn't have quite as much leeway, maybe whoever was the producer, I don't know how Leica's higher-ups work. I don't know who's above them and that sort of thing. But maybe with it being the first movie and them not having a track record, they kind of had to be a little safer, and they were worried that if they just made a movie about a girl, that a bunch of boys wouldn't go see it. I think people would. I think we're beyond that, but maybe that's a reason. I don't know. I'm speculating here. I'm just that's the only other reason I can think that they would add him, other than to have somebody to banter with.
It seems to me like that would be the big thing, because he's not necessary. He takes away from her character arc, in my opinion, and the emotional beats of the other YB should have come from the other father. Yeah. Which is how it is in the book. Yeah. Yeah. And they even do that a little bit. They do it in the movie too. He does kind of act like that in the movie. But yeah, I see what you're saying.
So after watching the trailer, YB doesn't really make that much of an appearance. He's in it, but not at the forefront. So the idea that they were adding YB to push more boys to watch by being able to put him in the marketing, I'm not sure that totally adds up, because he's really, at least the one trailer I was able to find, he's barely in it. So who knows why they added YB.
So that's really the big change. That YB is the biggest change in the way the story works, because it kind of affects multiple things. It adds a whole other character. It changes things in the other world because there's this whole another character there, and it changes how the resolution kind of wraps up. Was there any other major changes before? Because we're going to get into better in the book and better in the movie, because I have a lot for both. And we'll do some of that discussion. I think we'll have a lot of other things to talk about change-wise in there. So here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to go into better in the book. And we both have a lot of these. I know you explicitly have a lot. I have a fair amount for better in the movie, too. But right now, let's do better in the book. So hit me. What's your first thing? We're gonna trade back and forth, and I'm sure we'll hit some of each other's. But what's the first thing you had that you think is better in the book?
Okay, so part of what bothers me about this adaptation, aside from YB, is that the book is a lot subtler. There's some things that are in the book that when they made it into a film, they just kind of like dialed it up to 11.
Yeah, which movies tend to do.
Like, Coraline's a brat.
That was my first one. That was my first one.
She's a huge brat.
That was my first one.
And I get the more obvious character arc thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's a clearer character arc.
Yes,
in the movie.
It is.
But I like that in the book, she's just a kid.
Yeah.
Like, she's just a normal kid. She gets bored when she's cooped up in the rain.
Yeah.
She wants stuff that her parents don't want to buy her. She's not a brat. She's just a kid.
Yes. That was my literally the first thing I wrote down. I go, is it just me, or is she way more sassy and exasperated? Yeah. And I think they aged her up, at least from how I read. My version of her in reading the book is she's a lot younger than, and I don't know how old she's supposed to be in the movie, but she feels like a preteen. She feels 11, 12, 13 in that range. In the book, she felt 7 or 8 to me. Well, because she writes that note or that story that is very little kid-y written. And it's like spelled wrong. Like, she spells sausages like S-O-S, you know what I mean? Like S-O-S-A-G-J-E-S or
like,
something.
Comically wrong.
Like, I was like, what is that word? Oh, sausages. Holy cow. So I think they aged her up.
Yeah.
At least to an extent.
Yeah.
And yes, she's like super exasperated and obnoxious, not obnoxious, but I loved in the book her innocence and her sort of naivete and like the little kidness of her and the way it's written. And now a lot of that is hard to come through because a lot of it's in her head.
Right.
So she doesn't talk as much in the book because it's a book and we get to read her mind.
Yeah, it's her perspective.
Yeah, where it's from her perspective, so we get to read her mind. But we lose a lot of that subtle little kid humor that was some of my favorite moments in the book, where the lines of her talking about adults in her head, or like, and yes, she's not a brat. She's not demanding. She's not upset about anything. She's not exasperated. She's just a little kid whose parents are kind of ignoring her. But
not really.
And that's the thing. They really ramped that up more in the movie, which I actually is kind of a thing I liked to an extent. And we'll get into that with better in the movie, I think. But
see, that was a thing that I didn't like about the movie. Like, her mom is super mean.
Yeah, kinda. Yeah, she's not great. Which that is not the case in the book. Her mom's just sort of busy in the book. They're both just sort of busy.
They're just busy, you know. They just moved.
Yeah.
And all this stuff. And they're busy and she wants attention.
Yeah.
But it's never, like, I just feel like the movie really hammered it in. And to me, it feels a little bit lazy.
I don't disagree, because what the movie does is it takes everybody and turns them up to 11.
Yes.
And which is, it makes sense and it works and it's a more satisfying film. A lot of that stuff in a book works better because, one, we're reading her thoughts. It's not an hour and a half long experience like a 3-act structure, so you're not expecting to hit character arcs the same way and that sort of thing. Books just, I mean, it's similar, but the way that it plays out isn't exactly the same. Like, and so having them all have much more obvious character arcs in a film is much more satisfying to your general audience. And so Coraline going from the bratty sort of obnoxious not run away from home, but that sort of thing,
kind of,
to much more, to fucking Dorothy. No, there's no place like home. I love my family. I love all these people. Blah blah. But her parents also have an arc of realizing they were being because they were being more so absent and sort of like not giving a shit or just checked out in their own way, they also arc very hard at the same time, to where they also have that same character where they go from much more obnoxious and like ridiculous, which explains her then being more rebellious and bratty because her parents are worse. And so then they both hit sort of higher peaks on both sides, or peaks on both sides of their character transformation, if that makes sense. So I get why they did it. I do agree that the book it's more subtle and more realistic, kind of, whereas this is more like a movie. The movie is more like a movie. I think it works because it's a kid's movie, and this is kind of how that tends to be. But I do understand what you're saying in terms of the book having a lot more subtle and different characterizations of the parents and her and Coraline. But yeah, that was my first one for better in the book. It's like I liked her youth, her naivete, the way she looked at the world, and the way she expresses that through her thoughts to us. It's much more interesting and subtle in the book. But again, it's a movie. We're not sitting there. If they had a voiceover, they could do that maybe, but they probably didn't want to do a voiceover. Yeah. So I think that would be weird.
It would be weird, and I couldn't imagine that in like a stop motion kids movie.
I don't think it would be great. And a lot of times you just don't want to do voiceovers. Usually voiceovers are a crutch, generally speaking, in film. Yeah. You want to get away without. Speaking of Blade Runner in our last episode, that was my first one too. I'm going to hit my next one for better in the book, unless you had anything else you want to talk about with Coraline being bratty.
No.
This is my second one, because that was my first one. Okay, well, we'll just talk about it, because this is a thing that I thought was very strange. I thought it was going to be a major change. The way the movie is set up and the way that it's paced, which is actually a thing I have for better in the movie, and we'll talk about the beginning of the movie. I thought that for the longest time, she was just going to be trapped in the other world and not even have to like go save her parents. Yeah. Because the way they set it up is very different. And so that was and I was gonna like writing down, I was like, okay, well, this is gonna be way better in the book. If she doesn't have to make the conscious decision to go into the other world and save her parents, that's like a huge fuck up. And now they do that. Yeah. Which was nice, but
no, they do that in the movie. It had been a long time since I'd seen it, and I was thinking for a while that they had cut that as well.
Because that's kind of how it feels. Yeah. They changed the way the beginning, and again, we'll talk about it with my they made
some subtle changes in, like, how many times she goes to the other world, and how many, like, subtle changes in the way, the order that things happen.
Yeah, I noticed that. And I want to talk about that because spoiler, it's a thing I think it's better in the movie, personally, but we'll get there. All right, so my actual next one is, and this is towards the end of the film, but the scene where she goes into the theater to get the second or whatever soul is so much creepier in the book. Yeah. And it's so silly in the movie almost to an extent. Though reading it, I was like so looking forward to how they were going to do that, because I'm like, this is going to be terrifying. Yeah. So she goes in there and it's like it's not a candy wrapper. The thing on the wall that she goes and reaches into. It's like it's basically described as like a big white blob of spider web, essentially, or like some sort of webby material.
Like a cocoon almost.
Yeah, like a cocoon, and it's like gross, and she like has to reach into it, and then there's all the bat dogs or whatever, and all that stuff is there. But it's like, in my head reading it, it was way creepy and terrifying. Mm-hmm. And in the movie, it was kind of like not. And I guess because I had to go a little bit lighter, a little bit. But then they go creepier. Like the part after that, the rats. That part was, or not the rat part, but the there was a different part, or maybe it was the rat part. Yeah, when he's like slinking around, that I thought was. There was one other part that I thought was pretty sufficiently creepy, but I was disappointed, I'll just say, by the theater scene where she goes, because and it's a little moment, but I was like, oh, that is so gross, and when they're like describing her reaching and trying to find it, and the hand grabs her and all that, I was like, ugh. And it was sort of played more silly in the movie, which was unfortunate.
Yeah, you could take that feeling and, for me, like, apply it to the whole movie. Yeah. Because to me, there's such a tonal shift between book and movie. Like, the book is kind of a subtle, creepy, like, movie goes up to 11 again with the fantasy world
yes, it does.
factor, and everything's like bright and candy colored and
like insects and flying
yeah.
and like weird, like the furniture is alive and
yeah, and it's neat.
Yeah,
it looks cool,
and I think they just expanded on that because there's some of that in the book.
Yeah,
like the toys are alive in the book.
Yeah,
and like talk around, move around, and stuff, and you know, and so I think they took that and go, well, so that's a thing that exists in the universe. Living thing, like living.
Sure.
So let's do it to a lot of stuff because that'll be way more cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I just, to me, like reading the book, I imagined like a world that was almost virtually the same, but everything is slightly off.
Yeah. No, I 100% know what you're talking about. I 100% know what you're talking about and felt the same thing. It was a very different take on the other world.
Yeah.
And I think it was good and interesting, but very different. Like I know exactly what you're saying, and I felt the same way. But I didn't necessarily see it as better in the book, as just different.
Right. It's different, and I totally understand why they went with that for a movie, because it's a visual medium, and you kind of have to.
Especially for a kid's movie.
Yeah. But I prefer the way it was done in the book.
Yeah. Because and so in the book, everything in my head in the other world was kind of the opposite, because and now it makes sense, and this is a thing we'll talk about, which I think is better in the movie, maybe-ish. In the book, the other world to me is like exactly the same, except muted and grayish, kind of, where everything, to me in my head, I was thinking everything was much more muted, and like, especially like when she goes outside, it's always like hazy.
Yeah.
And she can't see very far because there's a fog and that sort of thing, and I imagined it very almost like black, not black and white, but like, especially when she was outside, I almost imagined it like black, like grayscale, and like almost like an old school like horror movie or something.
Yeah.
And they go the opposite direction, where it's more colorful and more vibrant and more interesting. And now I think that works in the narrative of the story, which we'll talk about when we get to better in the movie, but it's just different. And I can see liking both, and I think I can see why you would like the book version more.
Yeah.
Of it just being off-putting.
Right. It's off-putting. Like, I always imagined it, like, the same, but everything was, like, slightly tilted.
Yeah. Yeah. They should have got Tim Burton to do it.
Slightly off-kilter.
Should have got Tim Burton to do it and just have everything, all the shelves are slightly angled. No. I know what you're talking about. I know exactly what you mean, and I felt the same way reading the book. And I was a little disappointed at first with how but the more we got into it in the movie, the more I liked some of how it looked. Like, I love like when they walk out into the woods, and because it's a great sentence in the book about how they're walking through the woods and it starts getting thinner and thinner and thinner, and she says, and the trees start looking less like trees, and there's sort of the idea of a tree or something like that, which is a great line. And I thought they did that really well in the movie. It's done differently. It's more colorful than I imagined and that sort of thing. But I liked the way when they walked out there and the trees started getting more simple and less. I thought that was neat. And a lot of the stuff they did visually in the later half of the movie, where after she collects the stone, like the whole world turns to ash around her, kind of like in that particular area, which they kind of touch on in the book about, they say that they'll blow away or whatever if they go out in the sun, that sort of thing. It's very different than what I imagined reading the book. And so I could see that being... Yeah. I get it. Okay, did you have something else that we want to talk about better in the book? Because I have some more.
So the book is a pretty simple story, and I like that. So some of the, like, extra, like, backstory type stuff that's in the movie
like with the doll?
Me. Yeah, like with the doll, and then, like, the grandmother's twin sister who disappeared.
Yeah. It all felt like that was all unnecessary. I thought the same thing.
Superfluous.
Yeah. And I feel like they just needed the reason that was added, I think, probably has to do because so Wybie's not a character, so that grandmother's not a character. Right. And so we have no idea that any of these people, like it's the same three, well, kind of the same three. One of them's a little different, but kind of the same three ghost children that she finds in the closet, but they're not related to anybody we know. There's no allusion to any of that sort of stuff. So they add that whole element in for the movie where Wybie's grandma sister was one of the kids that disappeared in the house a long time ago. and that sort of thing. And I agree that that was all superfluous. Now, I think why they did that was because they added Wybie. Whatever those reasons might be, they added them, and then they needed a reason for him to have any sort of,
connection
other than just being a kid that's there. So that makes sense, and I don't think it takes away from the story in any way. It's unnecessary and superfluous. If you've read the book, you're like, well, that doesn't mean, okay. Yeah. But I don't think it detracts, and it's not harmful to the story or the narrative in any way, I don't think.
Yeah, I guess.
I get your point. Like, I don't think it necessarily, like, if you never read the book and you just watched the movie, I don't think that would be like a...
No, it's mostly, I guess, that one of the things I really admire about this book is that it's very economical storytelling.
Yeah, that's fair. That is fair. That's a totally fair point, because we don't get any backstory.
Yeah, we don't need it.
We don't get anything else after. We don't have a big moment at the end where they're all together,
happy,
planting flowers and that sort of stuff. I mean, they do have pizza, which was a reference to the thing. And so there's some extra added stuff that. Yeah, it was unnecessary, but again, to me, didn't detract from it as a movie if you're just watching it as a movie. I have two big ones.
Okay, hit me.
Okay, first, the hand is so much better in the book.
Oh, yes.
That decision, yes, whoever's decision, and now I get it, because you always have to amplify, and she kept getting creepier and creepier, but she got to a point where, so in the movie, eventually the other mother turns into like this giant needle spider monster
thing,
and it has needle hands and that sort of stuff, which is kind of creepy. But so the same thing happens in the book where the hand gets cut off and falls, and then but in the book it's the hand about 3/4 of the way that she has through the movie, where it's like the long, like when Coraline first comes back and she thinks that's her mom, and her mom hugs her and then turns into the big hand with the big long spindly fingers, it's like, and it's ghostly white.
Yeah, it's like your classic like Wicked Witch hand,
white skin,
too long fingers that are
and
too
nails
bony
are too
and
long.
have too long of nails.
It is so much creepier than this weird metal, because then it's also detached from her. It like once it comes back and it's just needles, it doesn't even feel like her anymore. I mean, even though we know that's what she was, like, that's what she looked like, but it's much more. To me, I feel like it would feel much more like her, and not just like a disembodied finger or like needle monster if it was her hand. You know what I mean? And I was so disappointed when she turned into that, and I was like, oh, if when she turned into the needle monster thing, I was like, oh, if her hand gets cut off and it's just a little needle hand, I'm going to be very disappointed. And it was, and I was like, that's unfortunate. That's really unfortunate.
Yeah, I didn't really get the choice to... I don't understand it.
The only reason they did it was because they needed to keep elevating how scary she was. And they thought, okay, well, after she's like the big, tall, creepy spider lady, now she turns into this giant needle monster.
Needle spider.
It's like her final form, which is fine. I wouldn't necessarily hate that, but if it were not for the fact that her hand gets cut off and crawls around on its own, and that is so much creepier if it's literally her
terrifying, disembodied
gross, hand. Bony, long fingernail hand is way creepier than this weird, like, kind of like needle spider thing. So I was very disappointed by that. I thought that's way better in the book, that it's actually her hand. I have another one, and it's another big one, but if you have something else, you can go first.
One minor thing, and I don't know because it's not necessarily better or worse, but it's different, and it was a change that I didn't enjoy because this is my favorite book and I'm a purist.
Oh, I understand it. We'll get there when we get to Harry Potter. Don't even worry.
So the snow globe
for me
that her parents are in the book, it isn't in the original house.
I have that.
Is that the next thing you're going to talk about?
It pertains to that, but it's not... It pertains to that, but it's... Yeah. Sorry, continue.
And so the idea in the book is that the other mother can't create. She can only, copy. Twist and copy. Yeah. So the snow globe being there on the other side of the door when it's not in Coraline's actual house is what lets her know that that's where her parents are. That's, the whole...
This is my next one, yeah. This was my big one.
What's the name for that?
What?
I want to say the smoking gun, and I know that's not right.
That's a fair, it's a smoking gun. That's probably a close enough term for it. Yeah. It is the thing that, tips her off. And I wrote that very early in my notes, was where they're unpacking and she's putting the snow globes on her thing. I'm like, no, that's very explicitly the point that she does not have snow globes on that mantle in that room. That's the whole point. Yeah, and that was mine. It was similar, pertains to that. My thing with this that drives me insane. So that's the thing, like you said, it tips her off. It's a smoking gun that makes her realize where her parents are. And it's also fun because as a reader, especially as a kid, I immediately knew when she talked about it. But as a kid, you could figure that out early in the book. Yeah. And you would feel so smart as a kid. Like, I know where her parents are. You would figure it out before she did. Because there's a very distinct line about a snow globe with 2 people in it. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a throwaway line. But, and again, now, I'm an adult, and it's easy for me to, and I know about storytelling, so it's easy for me to know that was what that was. But I think even if you didn't, I think as a kid, you would feel really like, oh, the snow globe, that's where her parents are. Or you might not notice right in that moment, but so I think that's great. And so she has to figure it out. Yeah. She figures it out. The biggest problem in the movie, it's just fucking Deus Ex Machina. Like, she just turns and goes, and the cat's like, they're right here. Yeah. And I'm like,
that's another instance, like, similar to YB coming out of nowhere in the end, where it takes that moment away from her.
This one was worse for me than the YB part, because the YB part, she at least also has to do a thing. Like, she also fights it. She also, it's he helps and does save her, but they both do it together, which again, it's better in the book. But this one really bothered me because it literally goes from her figuring it out and realizing, and then having to bluff the other mother, and she's like consciously in the book, like, don't look at the snow globe, don't look at the snow globe, don't look at, I think they're in the doorway. And then she goes to open the door, and then she backs up towards the mantle, and then she does throw the cat, which I love the visual of the cat throw in the movie. She 2-hand chucks it, which I love. It was very fun.
And we have cat. Yeah. So let me tell you how easy it is not to.
No, you could not chuck. If you try to throw a cat, they will just grab onto you, I feel like, and not let you throw them.
I've never actually tried to throw one of my cats.
I haven't either, because I love them.
But I imagine they wouldn't let me do it.
No, they would not let you throw them. They would jump out of your arms, or they would latch on you, one of the two. And so it completely takes away her... It's literally just days... Like, she's standing there, and she has no idea where her parents are. Yeah. And in the book, she knows. Yeah. She just trying not to let the other mother know that she knows, so that she can figure out how to get out of here. But in the movie, it's just... Like, doesn't the cat just like, hey...
Yeah, he kind of like points at it.
And she's like, oh, the snow globe. And I'm like, wait, what?
That's the whole thing. That's the whole... It bothers me about this movie. So I read this book. As I said, this is my favorite book. I still have the original copy that I had when it came out. I feel like I got this... at maybe in a Scholastic book order, or maybe at a book fair.
A book fair.
So, there's already that nostalgia factor there. Yeah. But, like, reading this, for me, was... It's gonna sound cheesy, but it was kind of groundbreaking for me, because I didn't have any stories where the girl was this clever and did it all by herself. Yeah. And there wasn't a boy involved at all. Yeah. I mean, a lot of other books that I loved growing up, I loved Ella Enchanted. And that's also a story with a brave, clever girl. Yeah. But then there's also a prince, and there's also, like, a romantic element. Yeah. And this doesn't have any of that. Of it.
It's just a girl.
She's just a girl having an adventure.
Yeah. And then has to be the hero.
Yeah.
No, I totally get it. I've read a lot of your writing. I can tell, having read the book, how formative the book was in shaping your voice and the way you write and the things you like to write and read and the way you like to tell stories. I can tell I know why this is your favorite book. I can see how formative it is. And so I can only imagine those changes would... I mean, because I as somebody where this book wasn't that for me, I didn't read it till last year. And not that I don't think this would, because I'm not a girl, and not that you have to be a girl to identify it, but I don't think as a little kid that this would be the book that I would, like, super identify with. I identified with Harry Potter. I liked Harry Potter. Yeah. You know what I mean? So me watching the movie, things annoyed me that were changed, but I could see how, and for me, it's Harry Potter. Like, when I watch Harry Potter, I have that same feeling, but I can only imagine it's tenfold, even for me, for Harry Potter, because I'm not a writer, as that is for you. And so I get, like, I totally get why some of the... Because it's still objectively a good movie. It's objectively a very good movie, in my opinion. I think it's well done, it's well paced, it's well told, it's beautiful. Everything, like, if you knew nothing of the book, you would go watch this movie and be like, wow, that was a great movie. But I can see exactly why you would have so many problems with it.
No, the movie... If I were a little more capable of disconnecting it from the book... I think I would really like the movie.
Yeah.
As it stands, I think the movie is fine.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's a good adaptation. For me personally.
I think that's the important part. Because I get what you're saying. I think it's a good adaptation, but it could be a terrible adaptation for some people with how they feel about the book. And with what the point of the book is, and what the point of the book was for you,
right?
I can see why it's absolutely not a good adaptation.
Yeah.
Or why you would not think it was a good adaptation.
And two, like, by the time the movie came out, I was a little older. You know, it had been a span,
Yeah, it was 7 years.
7 years.
Yeah.
And when I first heard it had been optioned, it was going to be a movie, I was cautiously optimistic.
Yeah.
And then I found out that it was going to be, like, a stop-motion kids movie.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, Lord, here we go. Because at that point, what I wanted was a live-action horror movie.
Yeah, which
That's what I wanted, and I didn't get it.
I think it would be awesome. I think what they did works. I think what Leica did, I think it works as a kids movie, which is funny that they aged her up for a kids movie. But I think what they did works. I think it's a good movie on its own. But I think it would also work just as well if they super hard stuck to the book and made a live-action horror movie.
Like a subtle, creepy.
A very subtle, creepy, almost like... I'm going to compare it to this without having seen it. But like Get Out, would I imagine, or something like that, where it's reality-based. Well, actually, that I think gets off the rails at the end of the spoilers I've heard are correct. But something in that style of a real-world creepy movie where literally if the person on the other side now the other mother is creepy in her own way even from the beginning with the button eyes, but if that was a person, like an actual live person with button eyes, it'd be even creepier, or arguably. And so I think it would be incredible, and I would love to see it remade again.
Give it to me, Hollywood.
They probably will at some point, and if there's anything Hollywood loves to do, it's remake movies. So I wouldn't be surprised, and if they did, and now they probably wouldn't, but maybe they would, because horror movies are successful, and they're becoming more successful, and they make more money, and they can do it on a low budget. I think you could make this movie for very little money.
Oh, I think you definitely could.
Although some of the CG with the outdoor, and especially towards the end when stuff starts turning into like they describe the world turning more like drawing.
But isn't
like
it getting less expensive to do that?
It is less expensive to do that every day. Yes, but I would be interested. That would be a movie I'd want to see. That would be really neat, and I would like them to do it. I don't know if they ever will, but we'll, who knows?
Fingers crossed.
Maybe one day. You got anything else for better in the book? Because I got a few things for better in the movie.
I think we hit all of my main points, so let's go ahead.
All right, it's time for better in the movie. Katie has nothing for this part.
There are a couple things that I like.
I know, I'm joking.
I don't know about better, but I like them.
I'll go first. This isn't necessarily better, it's different, but I liked it a lot. I like Mr. Babinski. I like his character, he's fun. The Russian... He's got some good laughs in the beginning of the movie when his character is introduced that's not in the book. Like, he's a lot less... At least, he's not in the movie very much, but... That whole opening scene with him and all this stuff going on, it's a little slapstick, it's a little silly, but it was funny to me and enjoyable, and Russian accents are always funny to me. It's a thing, maybe it's prejudice, I don't know, but like, a lot of times that style of like Russian... Yeah.
That
accent, over the top Russian,
like very clearly fake.
Yeah, they're very clearly like fake Russian accents. I don't know, they make me laugh, something about it. So I liked him. I liked that. I liked that they made a little more of his character, but it's just a little thing that I thought was fun. Yeah, what do you got?
The ladies who live downstairs, Miss Spink and Miss Forcible. I thought that having them stuff their dead dogs was a nice touch.
I was like, no, I don't think that was in the movie.
Book. It's not in the book, at least not that I remember.
No,
if it is, it's like a throwaway line.
It's a line, yeah.
But I thought that was like a nice, weird little...
quirk.
Yeah.
And then the taffy. There's some taffy in the book, but it's not
she eats taffy, but it's
not
like a plot point.
Yeah. Which was a little weird when they get the rock from there. I was like, that's strange, but okay. This isn't necessarily better in the movie, but I was not expecting to see giant pasty covered boobs.
Okay.
Like, what the in a kid's movie? I was like, holy Jesus Christ.
Actually, because I feel like, and I can't pinpoint it to an actual movie, maybe it was Box Trolls. I feel like Laika does that.
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen Laika do that in at least one other movie, like the comically huge boobs.
Yeah, they could, yeah. Maybe Box Trolls would have been the one, probably.
Yeah.
You know what? I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think somebody in the city or whatever, which it's been a while since we watched that, but yeah, I think you might be right. And it wasn't so much the comically huge. It was that they're just comically out there.
Basically naked.
She's basically naked. Well, and she said that with the first woman, or Spinks or whoever came on stage, and she was like, had like a dress or whatever, and it was kind of revealing. And then what's her name come out, and she's doing the Venus...
Yeah, the Birth of Venus.
Birth of Venus painting. You
know.
Yeah,
but she's like a pasty and a G-string.
Yeah, and this old woman, just giant boobs, just the world's biggest boobs, and
like 2 basketballs,
and they're just swinging around. I'm like, what the? Was ill prepared for that.
So you felt that was better in the movie?
No, I don't know if that's better because it's like not even a comparison. Like it's not a thing they talk about in the
thing that they talk about.
I mean, they talk about them being young and beautiful when they like. Come out of their suits or whatever.
Peel away their old husks. And
you know, Neil Gaiman confirmed that they were lovers?
Yes. Yeah. Lesbians.
Yeah. Which is never really touched on they just seem like friends or, like roommates or whatever. Golden Girl style. But one of the things I think is a little better, and we kind of talked about this, and this is kind of a 2-part. They spent more time, or they made it, the other world more enticing longer, which I think works better to an extent. She kind of immediately, which I like and don't, and this is a tough one, but I think for what the story the movie was telling, making the initial the other world initially much more enticing and wanting to stay there, like for the first 20 or 30 minutes of the movie, she can't wait to go back and be there, helps. And it also, especially because I'm sitting there, you're waiting for that thing to happen where she realizes, even if you never read the book, you would still know something's gonna happen. This isn't what you know what I mean? And so I like that buildup of you waiting for like what's gonna happen, when is this gonna hit, that this is not just a magically lovely land. And it also sucks her in more, and I think adds more to the appealing escapist nature of it for a little girl that feels not abandoned, but to an extent by her parents. Ignored, not abandoned. Ignored by her parents. And so that opposite, I thought that was an interesting idea. And to tie into that, I think the pacing in the book, I didn't necessarily love how much she goes back and forth. Because in the movie, she goes back and forth
a few times,
like 3 or 4 times, and in the movie it's just, or the book it's just like twice or 3 times. Like she goes there in the book, she goes there, comes back,
and she goes back,
and she doesn't come back by going to sleep. She which was a little strange. She comes back through the door, which I think was an interesting choice for it to be like she's not sure if it's a dream or whatever initially, which is whatever. But in the book she goes there and then she comes back, and then she goes there and then comes back and her parents are gone. And then she has to go in, I think is it. I think it's only like goes there like twice. Yeah. And then the second time she like runs away, or is like, I get the fuck out of here. And now I'm having trouble remembering because I'm getting confused with the movie. And then I think at that second time she runs away, she gets back and her parents aren't there anymore. And then she realizes she sees her parents in the mirror, and then decides she has to go back in, or decides to go back in and save them. So I think my point that I'm getting at of what I think is better in the movie, I think the pacing of her going back and forth a few more times and it building up more and more tension about what's going on in this world and making it more appealing, and then her coming out, and then I think that works a little better in the movie, the back and forth a little more. I think the beginning of the movie is a little better paced than the beginning of the book. kind of another different. It's a book versus a movie. But I liked the way they did that. Initially, it was a little weird to me, and it was initially the reason I was worried that they weren't going to do the thing where she has to save her parents because they take so long to get to that point, whereas that's kind of early in the book. It does take a
really long time to get to that point.
Whereas that's kind of early in the book.
Yeah.
And in the movie, the other mother just like is going to keep her there, and then she finally escapes, and then her parents are gone. But I sum it all up. I like the pacing changes they made in the first 30, 40 minutes of the movie. It's a little bit slower burn. I felt like to get to the big moment of having to save her parents, but it sets up the world a little bit more in a different way. Not more, but just differently. I think that
for what they were doing with the character arcs in the movie, it works.
Yeah.
I still prefer the book.
That's fine.
But I'm always going to. So I missed the rats.
Yeah.
That are in the book. Because they're super creepy and they like sing a creepy little song.
Yeah, there's no singing.
Yeah,
rats.
And they like run around and do the other mother's bidding.
Yeah.
So I kind of missed that, but there was that moment where the cat kills one of the mice and then it turns into a rat, and I thought that was so like appropriately creepy.
Yeah. And I also think it works. It makes more sense with the way they made the other world more appealing to have them be cute mice, and then later finds out that they're
little,
not
like kangaroo mice.
Yeah, little weird,
things,
like
jumping mice.
Cute little kangaroo mice thing, and then she realizes later after the facade drops that they're rats. I like that. I think that was clever. But yeah, I agree. The rats, because I was thinking the rats are creepy from the beginning, and so that that's one of the things that kind of like puts her off with the other world. And then my last one was that I like the payoff of the mom buying her the gloves. I don't think that was in the book.
No, that wasn't in the book.
And I like that. And again, it turns all the character arcs up to 11, but that payoff for her character arc of that she was listening to her daughter the whole time, she does actually love her. She was listening. She was just in a bad place, but she ends up buying her the gloves that she
Which was an expensive pair of gloves.
Right.
Did you notice that? They were like $25.
Yeah, and they were like, the ones all around them were like $4. Yeah. And then that one was $25. And I was like, well, maybe don't pick the $25.
Is that made out of like yarn that had to be flown in from the top of Mount Everest?
They're just knit gloves that are like different colors. Like they're not particularly fancy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if I was that mom, I'd be like, $25? No, we're not buying you $25 wool gloves.
You know what? We'll buy you 10 pairs of gloves.
Yeah.
You can have a new pair every day.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily better in the movie because I hate YB on principle. But I thought that having the other mother take away his ability to talk was like dark as fuck.
Yeah, it is creepy. I thought a lot of the visuals, I thought some of the visuals, like some of the stuff was really lacking creepy in terms of creepy, but some of the stuff they added and changed was really creepy.
Yeah.
Like the part with the dad and the piano, not the first piano part, but like the, when she comes back in.
Oh yeah, and the piano's like covering his mouth.
And then like pulls his mouth, he has a long face and like pulls his mouth all weird and like that, and then he's talking about and then how she sews YB's face into her mouth into a smile, and that sort of stuff was that stuff was creepy. Some of that other stuff they added. So well, that's all we got for better in the movie. It's time for the final verdict.
I think you know where I stand.
So, Katie, it's going to be a tough one. What do you think? Coraline 2009 and 2002, is the book really better than the movie?
The book is way better than the movie. The book is phenomenal.
Yeah.
The movie's okay.
That's fair. So that was I knew where this was going from the beginning, so I didn't need to worry about that. Mine is tougher. I think the book is slightly better than the movie, but only in the sense. I'll try to lay this out. I think they're both wildly successful at the two different things they do, or not the different things they do, but in the ways they do their thing. I like the book a little more. I don't know if I'd say the book is better than the movie. I'd say I like it more. I think it has a lot of aspects that are better. But there's something to be said for a really gorgeous, well-done stop-motion film that does a fairly good job adapting that story. That is very impressive to me. Oh, I will say this real quick: the music in this movie was boring. There was numerous times where I like was expecting a good score and would not, like, the one moment in particular when she was escaping from the other mother at the very end of the film and, like, trying to shut the door, I was expecting anything, and it was, like, very boring music. Like, I never think about that kind of thing in the moment, because usually the music's good. Like, in that particular moment, I remember consciously thinking, wow, this music isn't doing it for me. So that was a little thing. But anyways, apart from that, I think, like I said before, I think I like the book more, and the book is probably slightly better, or at least the book is better, but they're doing different things, and I think they're both wildly successful at what they're doing. I just slightly prefer the book, so I'll mark that up as a win for the book.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't, in good faith, continue living with you if I said that. I don't know if you would allow that, so kind of had no choice here. Help me. But, no, I do agree. I think the book is it's just it's more interesting. I like it more. So in this case, the book really is better than the movie. But I would highly recommend both. Read the book. It's only 160 pages. You can knock it out real quick. Watch the movie. It's a gorgeous movie. It's on Netflix. I would recommend reading the book first because I think it's a very different experience. Or if you don't want to read the book, I would not read the book. Well, maybe I would read the book after if you already seen the movie. Because they're just so different in tonally that it's very interesting. And it colors either way, I could see it completely coloring if you read the book first or watched the movie first, coloring how you felt about the other one. So it's an interesting choice. Do both. Read them, watch it, do whatever. It's your life. If Coraline taught us anything, you should be your own person or something. Oh, so that was it for our Coraline episode. We're going to have a mini episode coming out next week where we will be discussing a little mini review of Blade Runner 2049. We saw Blade Runner 2049. We're actually going to switch to a weekly format here starting next week. At least that's the plan.
We're going to try.
We're going to try. Where we're going to have next week will be a mini episode where we won't always have like a movie review or anything. We just happen to see Blade Runner 2049, and we're going to talk about it since we did the Blade Runner episode. And then the second part of that is going to be a preview of our next episode where we'll kind of discuss the background, kind of what we do in the first half of these first episodes where we kind of talk about the history of the film and the book a little bit. We're going to do that in a separate episode so we can get you something every week and also shorten the length so that we're not spending an hour and 20 minutes each episode. So I think that'll shorten each episode a little bit, but also we can add more. Our off episodes that aren't actual book versus movie episodes, we can do things like talk about movies and that sort of thing. Could be more of a free form kind of episode, and you can feel free to skip those if you're not interested. But
or don't.
Or don't. I mean, I'm just saying. We're interesting. You should listen to it. We'll be talking about cool stuff on them. Like I said, if you want to hear our thoughts on Blade Runner 2049, that will be next Tuesday-ish. So look out for that. And it'll be a preview of our next film, which is our second Halloween film, which is
The Birds.
The Birds, the Alfred Hitchcock masterpiece. Classic masterpiece. I couldn't decide which I wanted to say, so I just mashed it up. Yeah, The Birds, which it's been a long time since I've seen the movie. Did not know it was a book.
It's a short story.
A short story. But yeah, it's been a long time since I've seen the movie. I remember thinking it was okay.
I've seen like a tiny little snippet of the movie. Yeah. So. Yeah.
Well, we'll see. But that's our next one. Look for that full episode on The Birds in 2 weeks-ish. Right, yeah, 2 weeks. What else you can do for us, which would be great. So you can go leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher or however you listen to us. We have a few more reviews now. We're up to almost 10 and like 6 or 7 written reviews, which is exciting. Thanks to all of our fans who have done that. Also, check us out on Facebook. We have a Facebook page. We also have a Goodreads page. On the Facebook, you can send us messages, request things. We're still building up the fan base on Facebook. We don't use it a lot right now, but we will once we get more people and more interaction. We'll be posting stuff there and discussing future episodes and that sort of thing once the fan base gets built up a little more. But I think that is all we have for today, unless you have anything else, Katie.
I do not.
Cool. Let's wrap it up. Keep watching movies and reading books. Or just watching movies.
Or just reading books.
Do whatever you want.
It's your life.
Like Coraline said. She didn't say.
Yeah, I'm not sure that was the takeaway message.
Not at all. Not even a little bit. thank you for once again listening to This Film is Lit.